Hello, I'm gonna present to you the town of Saltillo. Geographically speaking, Saltillo is surrounded by the high mountains of La Sierra Madre Oriental, and it is located 400 kilometers away from the Texas-USA border and an hour away from Monterrey. Saltillo is the capital of the state of Coahuila, and right here you can see it is located on the south part of Coahuila, bordering with Monterrey. A little bit of the history of Saltillo. The name Saltillo came from a small pond of water, which still exists today. When the Spanish conquistadores came to settle in Saltillo, they saw El Salto de Agua and decided since it was a saltito, it would be called Saltillo. So that's what they called it. When they arrived, they found various groups, nomad groups, living here in the area, such as the Huachichiles, los Rayados, y los Nacahuas. And so in 1577, La Villa de Santiago del Saltillo was founded. Such event is commemorated on the 25th of July and the day of El Santiago Apóstol. Tlaxcaltecas. Because of the various quarrels between the indigenous groups and the Spanish conquistadores, a group of Tlaxcaltecas was introduced to Saltillo in order to give the nomads an example and to cultivate the land. They founded the pueblo de San Esteban de la Nueva Tlaxcala, which remained separated until the 19th century, in which they legally joined to form the city of Saltillo. Here are some of the special dates we celebrate here. We have 9th of January of 1008, which is the date when President Benito Juárez arrived in Saltillo and established his government until the 2nd of April of the same year. We also have the 23rd of February of 18,407, which is the armed conflict between the Mexicans and the North Americans in the Battle of La Angostura, which lasted a whole week. Then we have the 25th of July of 1577, which is the foundation of Saltillo. And we have dates like the 6th of August, which is La Fiesta del Santo Cristo de la Capilla, the first Sunday of September, which is La Fiesta del Ojo del Agua, and the 4th of October, which is La Fiesta de San Francisco. Some of the economic activities in Saltillo. The main economic activity here in Saltillo is the automobile industry, as we can see here, which is the creation of parts for automobiles and the manufacture of, for example, machinery for air conditioning and for motors, basically. Here we have a lot of industrial parks where this type of things are made. Here we have some of the demography. The population in Saltillo in 2022 was of 1,000,000 inhabitants, 50 men, 50 women. In comparison with 2010, the population had a growth of 25.3%. In Saltillo, 2,470 inhabitants speak indigenous languages, which corresponds to 0.24% of the total population. The most spoken were Nahuatl, Huasteco, and Totana. The principal reasons why people migrate to Saltillo were found to be first, because of familiars who live here, the second, for labor reasons, and three, because of social factors. Here are some of the living conditions here in Saltillo. We found that more than 25% of the people living here live in a house with 4 rooms. 20% has a house with 6 or more rooms, and only less than 2% live in a house with only 1 room. 65.8% of the population here has access to the internet, 47.2% has access to a computer, and 92.4% of the population has access to a phone. Around 20% of the population lives in moderate poverty, while only less than 1% lives in extreme poverty. Here we have some of the main complaints in Saltillo with the police. For example, we have the main one is family violence, which is 28.2%. followed by threats and narco-menudeo. We also have a chart of the general education that Saltillenses have, which is like 33% reach secondary and 21% graduate of a licenciature. And here we start with the cultural part of the Saltillo. Here we have tangible, as is the Museo of del Desierto, which is the most famous museum here in Saltillo because it talks about a lot of the bones we found here in Saltillo, which is the main part of the cultural. We have a lot of fossils and a lot of bones and a lot of dinosaurs. It also serves as a zoo and has a lot of ancient species of animals, as you can see here. We have el Museo de las Aves, which is unique here in Latin America and has a lot of species of birds, really beautiful. We have el Museo del Zarape y Trajes Mexicanos, which el zarape is the cloth, the official cloth here in Saltillo. Very beautiful. It is a very complex process, and it is illustrated here in the museum, as well as some of the Mexican suits we have across the Mexico. We have La Iglesia del Ojo del Agua, which is a very beautiful cathedral. And we have La Danza de Matachines de Saltillo, which is, oh, my bad. Oh, ah, sorry, which has a very unique piece of clothing. We have el Festival de las Ánimas in October to celebrate el Día de los Muertos, where we have the altar and everything. And one of the most famous, you can ask any Saltillense, the most famous food here is el pan de pulque. Very, very, very good. And every year we have La Feria de Saltillo, which is a very big feria where there's a lot of bands, plays, a lot of things to do. Very good. And here we have some of the famous artists that are born here in Saltillo. We have Mauricio Cortés Ortega, which do this kind of patterns in clothes. Very beautiful. Ernesto Oñate, which do this kind of art with pieces of metal. And Carla Fernandez, who does pieces of clothing and photos of it in very different pieces of art. And here the problematic that I'm going to talk about here in Saltillo is the abundance of immigrants who seek shelter. For example, here in the streets, you always see people from El Ecuador, El Salvador, and Honduras begging in the streets for money in their trip to the USA. We have La Casa del Migrante, where hundreds of refugees look for shelter for a week or two while they rest in their final stretch of the journey. In 2020, over 10,000 people came and left Saltillo in their journey, of which 90% were headed to the USA. The amount of people in the streets keeps rising, and places like La Casa del Migrante are already at full capacity, so many are left alone in the streets without shelter or food. The state of Saltillo. I have lived here in Saltillo for over 15 years. The main thing I can comment on is the exponential growth of it. When I was young, my city was no more than a big ranch, right at the start of its growth. As the years have come, we have seen the big companies come to our little town and settle here. We used to have only 2 cinemas, and now we have over 50. There was a time when El Tec de Monterrey had more Starbucks than everything in Saltillo. There's also, we have 1 Galerías, which is a lot here. And just this month, Saltillo saw its biggest step up in everything we have ever seen. We have our first Cinnabon, yeah, very important. And the properties here are starting to get more expensive, a lot more private housing, more schools, more universities. The growth Saltillo has had in the last 20 years is, I think, the biggest in Mexico. But places like the Centro and the cathedrals are still very well conserved and kept with the old styles. And that is all for Saltillo. Thank you very much.